Hi everyone, my name is Selvin and welcome to Selvin Student 101. In today's video, I'm going to give you an in-depth description of my interview experience. If you haven't seen my video on interview tips yet, it can be found up here. This will be helpful not only for economics, but for all subjects. Let's get into the video. So back in 2016, which was such a long time ago, I received the details about my interview in mid-November. In my application process, my letter actually got slightly mixed up in the post, and I ended up finding out about my interview a couple days later than most other people. Anyway, even though I didn't know whether I would have an interview or not, I was still preparing for it because I know that there was such a quick turnaround between the interview letter and the actual interview. The way I prepared is in the methods which I outlined in this video. After a couple of weeks, it was time for my interview. I'm not 100% sure because my interview was such a long time ago, but I think it was on the 28th of November around 2 or 3 p.m. I decided to wear casual clothes, which for me was a plain grey t-shirt and jeans, because this is what I felt most comfortable and confident in. So I took the day off school and I left my house in southeast London around 10:30. I took the train to Victoria and then I took the tube to King's Cross. By the time I got to King's Cross, it was already 12:30. I'm not sure if it was the nerves or if I just have a massive appetite, but I brought an absolutely gigantic lunch before my interview. I went to McDonald's and got 20 chicken nuggets and a wrap of the day. This definitely kept me going on the 50-minute train journey. And on the journey there, I didn't actually do any more preparation work because I knew it would just stress me out even more about the interview. So I just admired the countryside and eventually I finally got to Cambridge. By the time the train rolled into the station, the feelings of nerves and adrenaline were really strong. However, I did have quite a good feeling as I got off the train and was walking towards King's. The walk to King's is about 30 minutes, but because I was so absorbed in looking at all the pretty buildings and all the nice colleges, the walk actually felt super short. I arrived pretty early at King's, so I just sat in the bar and chatted to some other people who were doing their interview. Everyone I chatted to was really nice, and because we were all interviewing for different subjects, there wasn't this awkward competitiveness between us, and that really helped. Although unfortunately, I'm pretty sure none of them got an offer because I actually don't remember seeing any of them around in first year. After 15 to 20 minutes of chatting with them, my time had finally come. Interview structure massively varies by subject and by college. For King's Economics, you get some logical questions and a mathematical question along with an article to read for 1 hour before the interview. You have to do these questions in exam conditions and you're not allowed a phone or a calculator. I was given 3 logical questions, a graph to sketch, and my article was about poverty. The guidelines for these were to do the graph sketching question, at least 2 of the problem questions, and to read over the article and just jot some general notes for discussion in the actual interview. I was really nervous at this point because I don't think I'd ever sat down and literally had no clue at all on how to do a question. However, I knew that not getting in was not the end of the world, and I just took some time to compose myself and I just went through it slowly at a good pace. I'm sure many of you are going to be quite interested in what the actual questions were on, but unfortunately I both don't actually remember the questions and I'm not technically allowed to say the exact questions. However, I can say that my graph sketching question was a quotient function which had loads of turning points and loads of asymptotes to figure out. This was the question I started with first. I definitely tried to rush through it because I was pretty comfortable with calculus. However, because I didn't have a calculator, I definitely made some small mathematical mistakes. I got the general shape and most of the turning points, but the asymptotes I wasn't 100% sure on. I then decided to take a break from the graph and then to try one of the problem questions instead. These sorts of problem questions are fairly similar to the TSA style questions, but just kind of longer versions of them. I remember I found 2 of the 3 fairly manageable, so I did those quite quickly in about 20 minutes. By this point, I had 15 to 20 minutes left, so I started reading the article. The article was easy enough to read and it was pretty interesting. What I did was, I noted down some general points on the article and things I found particularly interesting that I could discuss in the interview. By the time this was done, I quickly drew a quick sketch of the graph and then I had a brief look at the final problem just in case they were going to ask me about it. And finally, I was called from this kind of exam style room to go to my interview. Now it was actually going to start. As I got led to the interview room, I was feeling fairly confident because I was able to do 2 of those problem questions. I was greeted by the 2 interviewers, who both seemed really nice, and I had done some research on their fields beforehand. That didn't really come in useful, but I guess it was just interesting to see some other areas of economics. The first thing we did was actually discuss the article. The chat did seem fairly casual, and the discussion was quite fun. They asked me what I thought about the article, what particularly stood out to me, and why the countries in the article were actually underdeveloped. They really made me feel like I was leading the discussion, which did calm my nerves quite a lot. And after 15 minutes on the article, the remaining 45 were on the graph sketch and the problems. We started with the graph sketch. Overall, I got the general shape quite correct, and the turning points were in the right places, but some of the asymptotes I drew weren't 100% correct. The sort of mistake I'm talking about is I drew them coming from minus infinity instead of plus infinity. I also didn't consider what happens to the graph as x goes to infinity. They did have to prompt me quite a lot to notice that for this particular graph, as x goes to infinity, the graph as a whole tends to y equals x. However, the rest of the graph was okay, so I was pretty happy with how it went. Next, we went on to the 2 problems that I had done. Unfortunately, I don't remember the exact problems I was given, but I do think they were fairly straightforward, especially in comparison to the difficulty of the TSA. We managed to discuss both of these problems within 10 minutes, and I think that this did impress them that I was able to get it quite quickly and explain it very clearly. So at this point, the only thing left to do was discuss the one problem that I hadn't attempted, even though I wasn't necessarily supposed to do it. Therefore, they just asked me to explain my reasoning and try and solve this final problem, and actually this one was also quite manageable, and I managed to do it fairly quickly as well. So after I'd answered that final question, they seemed very happy to just call the interview there, even though we didn't take up the full 1 hour. When I left the interview room, on the whole, I was feeling pretty confident because I managed to do all of the questions instead of just the 3 that they required you to do. However, I was a bit frustrated about the graph sketch because I thought in hindsight I probably should have got that. But then also, the more I thought about it, the more I just thought there was nothing really else I could have done beforehand to prepare myself for that sort of thing. So after admiring the King's College Chapel for a bit, I decided it was time for me to walk home. As I walked to the station, I was feeling really good on the whole, but I definitely didn't want to get my hopes up. It wasn't actually until the middle of January till I found out that I had got a place. Quite a lot of people from my school had interviewed for Oxbridge, so we were all really nervous on this day. When I found out, it was actually my first lesson of the day. It was a physics lesson. I could tell that several people, including myself, were constantly refreshing their emails just to see if they had received some notice from their college of choice. At around 9:30, I found out that I got a place. I told my friend sitting next to me, and then the rest of the class kind of noticed that what had happened, and everyone kind of just rushed over to celebrate. And it was a really nice feeling that everyone was just so happy that I had got an offer. Although a lot of people at my school did do an interview, only a very small proportion of them actually got an offer. I was really happy about this because I always thought the hardest part about getting into Oxbridge is the interview. I was less afraid of getting the grades than I was of getting an offer from the interview. So there you have it. That is the description of my interview experience for Cambridge Economics. I wish everyone the best of luck in their interviews for all subjects, and if you want some additional tips, feel free to watch my video up here. If you found this video useful, please share it with your friends and family. It would mean so much to me. Feel free to ask me a question in the comments, or you can email me at selvinvlog@gmail.com. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon!